It's good to be back. I want to say a little bit about Israel Appreciation Day. The thing that ASIC and Robert Chernin, and specifically Robert, is doing to talk about what the relationship is between the United States and Israel. That's very, very important. So if you get a chance, go check out Israel Appreciation Day. It's on Twitter. It's on the website. They have their own website. Check it out, because the value that we have with that alliance with Israel is so vital to world peace. It's important to scientific discoveries. It's really about having a democracy in the middle of a horrible, terrible part of the world. So check out Israel Appreciation Day. Robert is leading the way through ASIC and with the organization that he has behind him. And it's really, really important that we get behind Israel, because they need us as a friend and we need them as a partner. So let's get back a little bit to some of the Supreme Court things. One of the interesting ones that I found that they ruled on already is Alexander versus South Carolina State Committee.
Okay.
And it's about redistricting. And so one of the things in South Carolina is there's a district, I can't remember the district number, but it has always been Republican hands.
Okay.
Except for one blip for a couple of years when it fell out of Republican hands. And what happened is the case was brought up because they said what the South Carolina legislature decided to do was they were going to redistrict to make sure that Black Americans did not have a majority within that district, because it was leaning and going in that direction. So they brought this challenge saying that they were gerrymandering a district so that Blacks would not have a voice in Congress or have a majority in that district, because Black people traditionally voted for Democrats. And so they were saying, they were making this huge judgment call on it. So what did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court said the legislature can do whatever they want, because they based their decision not on race, but on partisanship. That the legislature has the authority to say, we're going to make sure this district isn't Democrat. That we're going to make all the districts in South Carolina majority Republican voters.
You can't do that.
Yes, you can.
What?
The state legislatures are responsible for redistricting every 10 years.
Right.
And so the Supreme Court said
census,
you can gerrymander and build districts based around partisanship. You cannot do it based around race, but you can do it based around partisanship. So the Supreme Court has basically said we can have all Democrats in one little area, or we can make the Democrats the minority in every district. So
I am okay. How did I miss this? How did I not hear about this case?
Well, what they did was they actually kicked the ball down the road a little bit, kicked the can down the road. And so this ruling will last through the next election, because basically they said, we're not going to overturn it. We're not going to overrule it. We're going to look at what the results are, but you can legislate districts based on partisanship, but
that's
not
crazy, Jay. I mean, that is literally, I mean, what is, okay, I don't understand. Why, okay. Why wouldn't it be illegal to gerrymander based on anything? What does it matter if it's race or political persuasion or, left-handedness? Why would it be anything other than by population and lines that make sense?
Well, they do it by population. So that a congressional district is about 700,000+ people. I mean, I live in Vermont, where we don't even deserve to have a congresswoman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, we certainly don't deserve to have the Congresswoman that we have, who is to the left of Bernie Sanders and to the left of AOC and Cory Bush and all of those folks.
Live.
But what they're saying is that it is up to the state legislatures to build equal representation within their districts. And they can do it on a partisan basis, but they cannot do it based on race.
Wait, you just said equal and partisan. Wait, you can't that's
Equal population. So what they're doing is, so I think there's 5 congressional districts in South Carolina. So they take their state and they cut it into 5 pieces any way they want. That's the power of electing people to your local legislature.
Oh, is that where we're going with this? The power of local government?
Power of local government.
You know what? I will allow the segue. I will allow it, sir. I am for it. That is actually a really good point, because if you have a problem with the way things are, get involved in your local government. That's where you can make the most difference.
Yes, and let's talk about local government in another case before we get into some real juicy ones.
Ooh, okay.
In this particular case, is regarding whether or not it depends on your point of view, whether you're a liberal or whether you're a conservative or you believe in small government or not.
Okay.
So in Oregon, believe it or not, in liberal Oregon,
yeah,
they made a ruling. The city, Grants Pass, Oregon, decided that they had too many homeless residents that were taking over the city.
Mm-hmm.
So they were taking over the city parks. They were sleeping in the parks. They were tenting in the parks. They were doing all the things.
Yeah.
And so they made it illegal for the homeless to sleep in parks.
Oh, yeah. This is what made way for it being constitutional to live in public, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So the Supreme Court's going to rule on this issue in Grants Pass, Oregon. And the majority of the justices, the conservative justices, are very much talking about local control. And the fact is, they are saying that 9 Supreme Court justices in Washington, D.C., do not know better what the ordinances should be in a city of 40,000 people. So it'll be very interesting to see what their ruling is and how they come out on this, based upon giving the local governments more power and more control. Now,
I mean, that's a good point, Jay. Oh, I interrupted you. Finish.
So what the liberals are saying, quite simply, is that you are making criminals out of the homeless. That you are saying they are criminals because they're without a home. They're houseless.
Right. Yeah.
They're not homeless anymore. You can't use that term.
That's right.
They're houseless or underhoused.
Mm-hmm.
Might be one of the
Housing
things.
challenged.
Yes. So one of the things they have all these rules and regulations for the homeless all over the country. Congress has made all of these rules and regulations. What they really should do is change it a little bit, because what's going on in DC, they should make a ruling against the homely and kick most of these people out of Congress. So if we change it from homeless to the people who are in an unfortunate situation, and those who are in a fortunate situation in DC, and just call them the homely, it's a whole different situation. So there's not a lot of homelessness in Congress, but there's a whole lot of homely.
That is, speaking of homely, just total side note, The Hill is a YouTube news outlet, if you will. And they recently fired one of their co-hosts, and there was a girl on there yesterday. I swear to God, poor Robbie, just shout out to Robbie over at The Hill, dealing with these crazy leftist liberal co-hosts. I swear this young man must have he he's not a Christian, but he's got to be touched with some of the Holy Spirit to be able to tolerate these people.
Wow. So I want to go back to the Oregon situation. So the officials, a lot of residents were complaining because people were sleeping, urinating, defecating outside in these parks.
That's right.
So 3 homeless residents challenged these ordinances in 2018, arguing that
paid for this. Go ahead. Go. Okay. Go ahead. I'll save my question.
Just because you're homeless doesn't mean you don't have any money. It just means that you prefer. Sometimes you prefer to not be tied down and being put in places that you don't want to be.
I'm sure there's an Elon Musk out there living on the street.
Right. So there are lawyers representing them, and they're asserting that the 8th Amendment in the case was appropriate because being poor is a status. So they decide that if you can get together with other people and call yourself something, you can be considered a status, which protects you within the 8th Amendment.
Which, for those of you listening, the 8th Amendment is against cruel and unusual punishment. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. What? So what? The not being allowed to live in a public park is cruel and unusual punishment?
Yes, because you are not allowed to defecate where you want to or sleep where you want to. How dare you,
bigot?
Yes. So.
Okay. That's as bad as the abortion excuse from RBG in the 70s. Depends on what your definition of the word is.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Anyway. Thank you, Mr. Clinton. So I know there's another case out there that's very important that you want to talk about. So why don't we talk a little bit about the domestic violence? I don't know if, when I read a little bit about it, I felt it was a little bit of a red flag situation. There's lots of movement towards red flag laws and all of that. But I think you have a little bit different take on it than I do. So do you want to talk about the Rahimi case?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There was another one. Lord Benjamin, can you look it up? It's similar to the Rahimi case, but it actually has a sympathetic defendant. Bruin. No, it wasn't Bruin. It's one that hasn't come. It might come up to the Supreme Court still, but it's basically, for anybody who's been watching me for any length of time, I have a criminal record related to 20 years ago before I got sober, and as a result, I still am not allowed to have weapons. I'm not allowed to own guns, or lethal guns that shoot bullets, let's say. So the question at hand is not whether or not Rahimi is a sympathetic guy. It sounds to me, honestly, when reading the case, like he's probably a dirtbag. But the reality is if our constitutional rights come just from being born a human being, then the government, the United States government, does not have the right to take that away from me just because I did something 20 years ago. And the fact that there's no opportunity to restore those rights, there's no opportunity for restoration in a meaningful way, really means that these bans are unconstitutional, because I have the right to own a gun just for being born a human being. I have the right to self-defense. So I have a vested interest in this case going through, whether or not Rahimi is a dirtbag or not.
Well, he certainly is a dirtbag. It's pretty clear, he's a drug dealer. He threatened his girlfriend with a gun, said he was going to kill her. There's also a previous thing where he was making threats against another woman using guns and those kind of things. So there's a real challenge here, and I'm really surprised that this case was the one that was brought before the Supreme Court. And I think, it's going to be a test of the Bruin decision, which you probably know better than I do, and you can talk a little bit about that. But one of the cases here, and one of the things that's important, is that if you can go to the extreme and take this away from the conversation of the person that's bringing the case,
that's right, correct,
versus what the law is and what the Constitution of the United States is very, very clear upon to not infringe. So I think that is something that is really important in these cases. And we'll talk a little bit more in terms of how that applies to the Donald Trump immunity case that's coming up.
Oh,
And how you have to take the people out of the situation and look at what the law is and how it pertains to the Constitution rather than how it applies to any one single individual. And that's why it's really important in this Rahimi case that he is a dirtbag. Because we could easily argue with you, Ericka, that you served your time, you paid the price for any mistake that you made.
Yep.
And so we can be very sympathetic to your case and say, of course, Ericka's a great person. She should have a gun to protect herself and all of those kind of things. So you are not a good plaintiff in this case because we like you. And we may be making a decision based around personality and not our Constitution. And when you get cases that go to the Supreme Court, it's all about the law. It's all about the Constitution.
So Benjamin does it say the name of the case?
I'm not, I couldn't find it. I'm looking right now.
Okay. Ninth Circuit. I think this is it. The Ninth Circuit in Los Angeles. It was another one of the same thing, but with a more sympathetic person. So that's interesting, Jay. I didn't realize that they would purposely pick a not sympathetic defendant or whatever, because in order to prove the point. Like, that's surprising to me to hear.
Well, it is, and I think you're going to see a lot of these cases when you start overturning precedent and you're overturning what the people have done in the past. You want to make sure that it's really constitutional. Yeah. And I think that's why this, to me, is a very intriguing case, because I don't want this guy to have a gun. He should not, in my opinion, he shouldn't have a gun. There are certain people in this country that, put him in jail.
That's
where he belongs.
He's not in jail. He should be.
Yes.
Anyway.
So I'm absolutely with you in terms of we need to have laws that apply to everyone, that we can't have selective enforcement. And I want to go back, when we come back from break, let's talk a little bit about the Trump immunity case. Let's talk a little bit about the January 6th defendants and all that applies to them, because it's really, really important that we separate the person from the law and that no one's status is above and better than anyone else's.
You hear that, people? Consistency, consistency, consistency. And so let's hear from some other folks who are consistent, the American Center for Education and Knowledge.